Welcome to the Clifton Worley Show. This week we have the WorleyBirds, Josh and Nick, and we have a special guest, Mike McCaven. Hey, Mike.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
It's going good, man. Happy to have you here on the show. Now, you're a product specialist with Roland, correct?
I am. I'm the guitar product specialist, as far as I know, for Canada. And, yeah, I mean, I've been doing it for a couple of years now, and prior to that, I was with Digitech and Koch amps and Johnson amps. Did a bunch of different things. So.
Oh, super cool.
Cool. Well, that's interesting. If you were, I'm sure that's like very similar but different worlds, Digitech and then Boss, right?
Very much so, yes.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, we're just gonna do a little bit of Q&A tonight, and ask you about some of that, and then also I noticed that you're in a couple of projects working on. You're in the Canadian band Gypsy Rose.
I am, yes.
And then you were telling me about some other projects as well.
Yep, I have a little power trio on the side called Lost in Toyland, which we're kind of like a King's X meets Winery Dogs kind of vibe with a little bit of a police thing going on.
Oh,
wow. Cool. That's a lot. That's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, we kind of intertwine a lot of our influences in there, and then my beautiful life mate Deanna Faye Prawl and I have a little project on the side called Starfish, which is kind of like garbage with a little bit more guitar and a bit of more of a prog edge to it.
Well, that sounds cool.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's neat stuff.
So so tell me a little bit about your role there at Roland, and what do you do, and what does a product specialist do?
Well, I originally joined the band. I joined the company because I'd seen an ad for bilingual ISD customer service rep, and I thought, you know what, I wasn't very happy with where I was at the time, so I decided to apply. And very quickly I realized that, hey, these guys are pretty serious about having me on board. So I got the job fairly quickly. And unbeknownst to me, and well, I mean, it's a little no surprise, I was terrible at ISD. Like, the whole desk job thing just was not me. And then what had happened is 909 days came around, where we released, like, it was a mind-blowing amount of products, and they had me demoing the Katana amps for the big gala event. So, you know, we opened up the Roland Inspiration Center, the very first one in the world, in Toronto, at the at Liberty Village in the Toronto Carpet Factory, and they chose little old me to demo the amps. And then shortly after that, they discovered, hey, you know what? This kid's onto something, and why do we have him chained to a desk when he plays like that, makes the amp sound like that? Let's get him on the road. So they pretty much created a bit of a position for me there, which is kind of unique, because I sort of dance the edge of being a product specialist, as well as I handle my own set of little accounts, mostly independents, and you know, I basically do the job across the board. And yeah, I've opened up a few dealers even. I mean, I think I've opened up 4 or 5 dealers, which is sort of like really rare in the job title that I have. It's not even in my job description. So you touched upon just some of the things that I do. Day-to-day sort of visits with dealers. I go into, you know, basically product training with the staff, you know, making sure they're all on board with the new products coming down. Often I'll create back orders with the buyers, or, you know, with some of the bigger stores, you requisition the stuff from the head office. I do events. I handle all sorts of events. So, you know, stores will be having sale days or big event days. I'll be the guy that goes in and demos the Boss gear. They usually strategically have me positioned so that, you know, I bring a bit of a crowd. I kind of keep it really light and less on the tech side.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're doing these family events, and you got, you know, little Johnny and little Abigail and mom and dad and all that, you don't want to overload them with details about, well, this thing has a 96 kilohertz floating point chip and 32 bits going in and 32 bits going out. They want to hear someone rip a guitar apart and put it back together. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So there is a little bit of an entertainment value in there as well, and just educating the public, do a lot of tech support. So that's sort of day-to-day sort of things I do.
Very cool. So you mentioned that kind of the timeline there is that you came in as the Katana kind of was being launched. Is that correct?
Yes, that is absolutely true.
Awesome. So, and the Katana's been out for how long? About a couple years, right?
Yeah, it's going to be a couple years now.
Okay. And so I noticed one thing about Boss that, I've been really, really heavy into this gear thing for about 4 or 5 years now. I've played for 15, but one of the things that I've noticed about Boss is like here all of a sudden the last couple of years, like they've got a lot of new exciting products that
for sure.
Yeah, that you got the MS3, which we know some guys that rely heavily on that, and then the whole Katana line. Now there was a precursor to the Katana line, right?
There was, yes.
No, that was I forgot what that's called. Is that the Waza?
Yeah, what it was Boss put out the Wazacraft amp. What it was a showpiece, a platform, sort of like the look at what we could do. So what they created was a 4-channel beast, and they got Dave Friedman involved in voicing the one of the actual modules in it.
Mm-hmm.
And they created this monster sounding head, which was unbelievably expensive, but having gigged with one and had one on my sample account, it's unlike anything I'd ever plugged through. And I'm coming from, I own several Fryette products. I have a 5150. I've got a Holy Grail GCM 800. I've owned some serious amps in my lifetime, and I still have a good chunk of really good amp. But this was a whole new creature because they created this beast that they cracked the code of making a transistor amp sound like a tube amp.
Mm-hmm.
And I was blown away, to be honest with you. And I'm the guy that in the office where it's just like, you know what? Let Mikey try it. Mikey hates everything. Right? And that's pretty much what's happened most of the time wherever I go. When I was with Digitech, I was like, "Cool, let Mikey try it. He hates everything." And it's true. It's a curse. I speak my mind. I tell people if I don't like something or if I think something's really stupid. Well, and it's gotten me into trouble over the years. But hey, look where I'm at. I'm okay. I'm doing all right.
That's called discernment, right?
Yes, it's called brutal honesty.
Yeah, for sure.
So what happened was they learned a lot from the whole process, and what they created was a pinnacle in order to launch a whole new platform to bring that technology to the masses. So what happened was that program, the voicing for the Brown sound, ended up trickling down into the into the Katana, and then you saw a lot of the power amp designs fall into the Katana as well.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So and literally what they did is they've got this amazing product, which, I mean, for the people I've played it for, they're blown away that it's actually a transistor amp. They're completely in awe of the fact that it's very much not a tube amp.
Yeah.
So.
Well, yeah, that was me totally, Mike. I was the first one out to have it. And I'd played tube amps all my life. And I'm a slide player. I'm a blues guy and
nice.
blues rock guy. And I sold all my gear off, and I was gonna, when I had my first daughter, and then not all my gear. I had a couple things. I had like a resonator and stuff, and I needed an amp. I had a 5-watt tube amp that was point to point, but I needed something that I could possibly play with other people. that I could play and sound good at low volume instead of having to crank it like the 5 watt. And I needed some options. So I had like about $100 to work with, and I was thinking, well, maybe I'll get a Pro Junior again or a Blues Junior. And when that Katana came out, something was telling me, you got to check that Katana out. And I blindly, I just ordered off Sweetwater. I ordered the 100. The 50 watt was actually sold out, and there was a waiting list. So I bought the 100, and I got the 112 100 combo, and I've been blown away ever since by it. I run it like I pretty much crank the master. I run it on the clean channel or the crunch channel, and I run it a little hotter on the gain. I run it in the clean channel, and on the crunch channel I run it lower gain, and then EQ to taste depending on the guitar. And I use the reverbs and the delays. I love those, and I use the boosters every once in a while. But that amp, when you sit in front of it and you can just hear it, like you can hear the compression that you don't hear in any other solid state amps. I mean, the Marshall valve state I used to have when I was a kid, like that had actual like A tube in it at least, like you didn't ever hear that. Like this thing for some reason sounds like almost like an AC-15 or an AC-30 the way I run it. It shouldn't sound like that. And it's absolutely, it's crazy.
Sorry guys, that kissing sound, my better half sort of just joined me in the car, so I wasn't blowing a kiss at you guys.
I thought you were kissing me for the compliments.
Well, yeah, maybe a little bit.
Yeah, that's and Nick kind of convinced me to buy one a little bit, because he was explaining this, and it's like, man, I mean, I've always had tube amps, and I've not shied away from solid state amps, but I needed something with a little bit more versatility than my Orange Crush, and I didn't want to get another big heavy tube amp, and so I got the Cat 50 and the Katana 50, and it just accepts pedals so well, and that's kind of leads to the first question off from the Katana boards in the Facebook group. Why does it accept pedals so well? I mean, what makes this thing so different? Because I know I've tried modeling amps, and they do, and this is not a modeling amp, but they do not accept pedals at all. Barely. I mean, this thing accepts them just like a regular nice solid state amp or a nice tube amp. Why is that?
The initial algorithm, like the way the reactance, if you want to call it that, it's sort of like a precursor to the aired technology that came about with the GT1000. What they did was they created with the Waza this amp you can multi-platform it, so you can gain ramp it with a dirt box in the front, and it takes it really well. So because of that program ended up on the EEPROM that went into the actual Katanas. And as you guys know, there's like a little beta unlocking thing to get all these new amps and whatnot. It literally has the same chip as the GT100. So essentially, it'd be like plugging a pedal in front of a GT100. So it's going to take it very much like that. But like I said, Boss, when they looked at this amp, I mean, they'd had some success with the Blues Cubes. They had some success with the GA series amps and whatnot. But what they wanted to do is create a brand it so that a guitar player is going to really identify with it. Roland is a keyboard company, where Boss is an identifiable guitar company. And that's kind of where the design and the philosophy, and it's got to be able to take pedals, it's got to work on its own really well, it's got to sound great right out of the box. That's kind of where the whole design philosophy came from with this thing.
For sure. The thing with Mike, the weird thing with it that I've noticed is like it takes boosts. Like you shouldn't be able to boost a solid state amp and push it over the edge like a tube amp. Like it should sound like it's breaking inside. Like
that's true.
In this, when you have that master cranked and you adjust the gain and volume, and you hit it with an EP boost in the front, or a MOSFET boost, or a normal LPB1, an Electro Harmonics, or any kind of boost, it reacts to it like a tube amp. Like I don't understand how they were able to do that. Like it's
all in the programming and the algorithm. They spent a lot of time on research and development. They kind of let the other companies out there make their mistakes and sort of cast their lines out into the sea, kind of thing, right? You know, when you look at the competition like the Mustangs and the Spider series, a lot of the amp modeling in there is very one-dimensional. So, and what they wanted to do is they learned from that. It's almost like going back to Sun Tzu, like the art of war, right? It's a very Japanese concept. Let's just wait and see what the enemy does and lie in wait, right? Not that, you know, the other guys are the enemy. I mean, we're all going towards a common goal of creating good products so that, you know, all musicians can have different flavors and be able to create music. But what we did is we sat and watched and let them sort of do their thing, and then we're going to do our thing. So
very cool.
That's really an interesting perspective, because I know, and I mean, actually, if you go to the Boss Katana group, a lot of times that's the main thing that'll come up that's kind of negative about the Katana, is that it doesn't sound quite as good as this or that modeling amp. And then you get into it, and they're at bedroom levels. They have nothing else in front of it, and they're not really using the amp the way that you use a guitar amp, like if you're playing out or if you're playing with others, or even, you know, if you're practicing at near gig volume. I mean, and that's where modeling amps kind of shine. And even the Katana can sound good if you know how to set it up there, but it acts so much like a regular amp that sometimes it can sound a little bit, you know, you've got to tweak it. Where like, you know, like a 16-year-old with a Spider Line 6 Spider on the Insane channel in their bedroom with scoop mids, it sounds amazing to them, you know. But then you take that out and you try to play with anybody and you can't hear anything.
Well, this is the thing, right? I mean, the common misconception with a lot of guitar players is just trying to recreate a mastered guitar sound out of a guitar amp.
Yes.
And a lot of the amps out there that, you know, model amps, they're great for that. But what Boss have created is an actual guitar amp. This is why you don't see a tuner in there. I know that was one of the questions that in the forum was asking. Why isn't there a tuner? Well, you know what? When you go out and you buy a 5150 head, there isn't a tuner on it. You got to go buy a stomp tuner. And quite honestly, you get a far better tuner by sticking it on the floor than you do with the whole built-in thing. And, you know, in terms of the tweakability, yeah, I mean, it's a great sounding amp right out of the box, and you set it down on the floor, you plug in, and you go, and you get some really great sounds. Where the mystery is, and it's interesting because I had a chance to sit down with one of my heroes, Chris Poland, who used to play with Megadeth and Ohm, and I was talking to him about the software, and he was totally unaware of it because, I mean, you know, he's such a musical genius, and he's sort of locked in his own world creating, you know, this amazing otherworldly music that, you know, he doesn't have time for the whole technology thing. But when I talked to him about the unlocking, you know, the second delay patch, being able to do series parallel, pre-post loop, the SDE 3000 model that's in there, which, I mean, holy smack, that thing is just, let's put it this way, that the price of a Cat 100 is worth it for me just to get that SDE 3000, because I owned one and I know what it sounds like. And yes, it's an emulation, and I would say it's 98% there.
Oh, it's really good. I just got the update and discovered that the other day, and that delay, I mean, all of the settings, I mean, I was like, oh, what's this thing? And I'm like, oh, that can't be what I think it is. And
I use it awesome on every single patch. There isn't a patch that I don't use it on.
It's good.
It's like the secret sauce in the Big Mac. It just, you stick it on everything, it sounds freaking amazing.
Well, let me ask you this: how much? Okay, so I know that first you had the blues cubes, and then this Waza thing came out, and then here we are with the Katana, and it's super affordable for guys who are starting out, and even like you know, gigging players. I know, for instance, like Brian Burke with 60 Cycle Hum, he's done some extensive demoing comparing these to tube amps and throwing them up on YouTube on his channel. and he has gone to, gigging with this instead of bringing out his tube amps because it's so light and you can lug it around, and it's not something super expensive. But how much of the technology here is crossing over between like what's available in the MS3? Because I have a little bit of experience playing the Katana. One day, I'll just tell a short story. I got kicked out of a music store because I was trying to play at gigging levels to see where this would go, and it performed very well.
Yep. Oh yeah, for sure. The power amp is designed to react exactly the way a tube power amp would react.
Mm-hmm.
Like the louder you go, the more ballsier it gets, and the more bassier it gets, and the more presence it has. Like, and I don't mean like high end presence. I mean like it doesn't get washed out.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny because I used to make fun of the whole cut through sort of campaign that they had along with it. I was just like, what did he mean by cut through? And then when I actually got to put one up against the drummer, I was just like, that's what they meant. Because it allows you to cut through a band mix, and it literally reacts like it. I mean, I could, on the 50 watt setting on my Katana Artist, I could pretty much bury a drummer.
Mm.
And I've done it.
Yeah. Well,
that's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I noticed, I started out playing transistor amps that before the modeling phase came along, and then I got off into modeling amps for a while. Did the Line 6 Spotter and the Vox Valvetronics, and then I got heavily into tube amps, and I knew that there was a little bit of magic in transistor amps, but I'd kind of given up on the whole modeling thing, because in my mind those were two different things. You either could get an old transistor amp that would take pedals, or you had like the Line 6 Spider that sounded good by itself, but then you start putting other things in and it pegs out the volume in it. It doesn't take a boost of any kind. And then when I played this Katana, I was very much impressed that it was like the best of both worlds on that, and then pushing into acting like a tube amp. So it really does marry the transistor, what was good about transistor, what's good about modeling, and then feels like a tube amp when you play it.
Well, let's not forget one of my favorite guitar tones is King's X, Ty Tavern.
Okay.
And the first handful of, I guess, 5 or 6 albums, he was pretty much using a Gibson Labs, which is all transistor, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, and, Holdsworth has used some transistor amps when he was using the Pierce stuff. So there's a lot of guys out there who've, embraced that technology. I mean, Richie Cosson was using that Yamaha DG100 amp for a little while, so...
Yeah.
I mean, there has been some great sort of progress with that stuff. But, yeah, I mean, there is a little bit of voodoo going on there. There's some black magic going on with that amp. I mean, it's definitely got its own vibe. To truth be told, I was kind of like, it's another modeling amp at first, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Then I got locked in a boardroom with it and my guitar, and I was told to not come out until I, figure this thing out. And I'm like, no, you can't do that. There's all sorts of like Geneva Convention stuff going on there. But then,
I can see that. So Mike, how are you running it? What are you what's your gigging rig with it?
You're gonna laugh, but I go straight in and that's it.
Really? Do you use the foot switch? Well, you have to, right?
Yeah, I use a GAFC for sure. Yeah.
What do you like? What kind of settings do you like on it? What is your bread and butter?
I love the crunch setting for some of the mid gain stuff, like for bluesier stuff, for Eric Johnson type tones. I love the brown setting. Use that a lot. So I kind of run between the clean, the brown, and the crunch.
Do you use any of the boost effects in there, or you just run that?
Sometimes I do. Depends. Like if I'm trying to get like say a Jimmy Page tone, what I'll do is I'll use the chain 3, and then I'll sort of put a treble booster in front of a tape delay, and then from there I'll basically add on the effects afterwards, like a plate reverb, and then use the crunch and just dial in some really cool tones.
Yeah, I was actually pretty impressed. One of the things I noticed about the Katana, you might be able to speak with this, is like I run a board into it, so I'm not really too worried about the boost or anything like that. And I don't have the foot switch yet. I'm going to get one eventually. But one of the things I noticed was that the boost effects seem to work better with the actual drive channels on the amp.
Yes.
And when you get into sneaky amps, like, it's funny because like I had one fuzz running through, like I was using them up through one of the settings and one of the sneaky amp settings, and then I was using them off through like the Vox setting, and it sounded terrible. And
Right.
like it was reacting, they were reacting the same as the other effects actually act, like the real deal actually acts.
Right.
Like, I was having, like, I love that. I was using the Marshall 1959, the lead, the other day, and I was running my Strat through it. I made a Strat channel just for that guitar, and I was running that Marshall 1959 lead 1 and 2, and I was pushing it with the Tube Screamer, and I was getting that like Chili Peppers kind of sound, and I was like, I got to try the DS1 now because I've never really liked the DS1 with a lot of the amps I had, but I like a DS1 with a Marshall, so I threw the DS1 in front of the Marshall, and with lower distortion. And I was like, that's it. That's exactly what it sounded like. That's what it reminded me of when I was a kid, when I'd run my DS1 through my like Soptech amp,
Dude, how can you not like a DS1? Who doesn't like a DS1?
I do, but I like it through certain amps, and it's got to be said a certain way though. I like how
poo-poos all over the poor DS1. I don't know why people do that.
I like on the amp. I like the fat DS1 better. That one sounds great.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah, and even the fuzzes, like I really like the octave fuzz.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, through the octave fuzz seems to sound better to me through the crunch channel. I think that really sounds good through the crunch channel. I didn't like it much on the clean, but it's funny how they play together. Josh, what are some of the other questions from the Facebook group?
Well, I've got an interesting one here, and I know that you're probably a diplomatic guy, Mike, but I gotta ask you, what's the strangest?
Am I diplomatic? Yeah.
Hey. Well,
am I diplomatic? I'm definitely not diplomatic.
Wait, the thing is, you're a Canadian, so it's gonna sound nice whatever you say, so it's gonna be okay. So here's the thing: what's the strangest question you've ever been asked as a product specialist?
I was asked if the GT1000 can be hooked up to a cappuccino machine to make the coffee darker.
No way.
That's a terrible troll.
Oh my god! Yeah, that's not even a good troll. That's like what?
Actually, I've had some weird ones. What was some of the ones that one guy thought most of this, like, he was suspicious of me that I wasn't actually playing. He thought that it was all pre-recorded and it was just some sort of magic box that made me sound the way I did. It's kind of strange. It was very awkward. I kind of had to pull out an acoustic guitar and start, okay, well, no, this is me actually doing this, dude.
Really?
Yeah.
That's something I haven't experimented with, and it's not on the boards here, but I am curious. The acoustic channel on the Katana, is that a really a flat channel, and you could like run a mixer into it and actually use it as or what is that like tuned towards just a guitar? Because normally when you're using an acoustic amp, you're kind of using it as a monitor, you know. And so I mean, would the Boss in that aspect work as a monitor / small PA, or is it more just for somebody who wants to try an acoustic amp? Is it really something you can go out and gig with acoustically?
Well, yes, you can technically gig with it acoustically.
Okay.
What it is they wanted to create a very flat channel that acoustic players would be able to work with. There's been other companies that have done, multiple sort of guitar type, like, being able to take an electric guitar or an acoustic guitar. And some of them have been okay, and some of them have actually been dismal. But what they wanted to do is create a value level with this instrument, because there's some great effects in there. And what they wanted just is a good, flat, clean platform that a piezo-equipped acoustic will sound good in. I've never tried running a mixer into it. I don't think it would be that flat.
Yeah.
But,
that's what I figured, because I was just thinking, well, what would it be? How good would it be for actually how you would use an acoustic amp for an acoustic? It sounds more like it was designed for that guy that's, well, like you. Like okay, well, I'm going to play an acoustic through for one song, and so I'm going to flatten it out for this one patch, right? That's more like what it's meant for. Sure. Like you've got a Poison cover band and you've got to do that one power ballad or whatever. So yeah, I got you. Let's see here. I'm going to ask another question from the groups.
Sure.
And I don't know if you can answer this one, but is there anything in the future, in the next couple firmware updates, that are going to be big changes for the Katana, or anything interesting coming up the pipe that you can talk about? We understand.
I can't really get into breaking non-disclosure agreements and stuff like that.
Gotcha.
So,
yeah. I had to ask as a second most popular one. Yeah.
Now, all that said, they've designed the Katana amp to be able to be upgradable. So when you think about what has come and gone from Boss and what's available, who knows?
Mm-hmm. Ooh, that's.
I'll throw one sort of obvious one that for me that I would love to see is, okay, well, I'm a huge Entombed fan, right?
Okay.
Big Entombed fan, and the Left Hand Path and Clandestine albums for me are like, holy grail heavy metal sounds, right? And those tones were created with an HM2 going direct into a PV Bandit.
Really?
So when I think of like that sound, that Gothenburg tone, all those Swedish bands coming out of that era of Swedish death metal, they were all using that HM2. So I would love to see that model in there, just because it is such a holy grail pedal for me.
So,
yeah.
It's such a holy grail pedal that in our house in Lindsay, we have a bookcase in the front foyer. We've got like giant 10-foot ceilings, and when we started decorating the house, we looked at, we want it to be a musical house. We don't want it to look like suburbia thing. So we have like H.R. Giger stuff on the wall. There's an eagle skeleton on top of the bookshelf looking down at us. There's some Hellboy paraphernalia. And then on the bookshelf itself, I have key Boss pedals. Like, for instance, I have an HM2 in the box facing forward with the Clandestine 12-inch record on it. And I've kind of created this little, almost like historical thing of some of the Boss stuff. I've got an anniversary DS1 that's in front of the PIL compact disc, signed by Steve Vai. So I got one of those on there.
Nice.
Since he used one of those, so I got little things like that in the house that I've sort of collected, and I'm working on getting a bebop fuzz, which I'm really excited about. So yeah.
Hey, Mike, can you? I got another question for you. Can you speak to the speaker a little bit?
That's a good question. Yeah.
I really, there's something cool with the speaker. It's like a 100-watt speaker, isn't it?
Which speaker are you talking on? The Artist?
The one that's in the 112 or the 212 combo of the 100-watt.
Okay.
Katana.
Yes. The speaker, what they did is they basically wanted to, if you really look at the specs, it's going to be really close to like a Vintage 30 with higher power handling, essentially.
Really?
They wanted something that was, don't forget, the Vintage 30 is a 65-watt speaker or 75-watt speaker. It was basically a replacement or a reboot of the G12C75s.
Okay.
So what they wanted to do is create this good rock and roll guitar speaker that was going to work good in these amps.
Oh wow! That really surprises me. There's a complete busted myth right there. I don't know about you, Nick, but I was thinking
No, that totally does. I was thinking that was like some kind of crazy high wattage
Flat.
flat Celestion-y type thing that would like make this like the full platform amp that everybody wants it to be, or said it was.
But it's not.
That's cool.
Don't forget the models in the amp are very much like what an amp would be, right? Like, so they wanted to put something in there that a guitar player, it would be familiar with guitar players' ears. Now, that said, they've also now created the new custom. They've with the Artist, they've put in the new custom Waza speaker in it, which basically was a culmination of 5 years of research and development, which led to the design of this amazing 100-watt monster speaker, which, I don't know if you guys have heard it, but it's nothing short of breathtaking. This is coming from the biggest doubter in the world. What they did is they created the warmth of a classic broken-in greenback with the modern elements of, say, like the old Sidewinder, the 150-watt Sidewinder that was out for a while with Celestion. The ones that they used to put in the 1912 cabs. So it's like a combination of those two. So you got vintage modern happening with super power handling, really creamy lows, and just like buttery mids. And then what they did was they gave it a hemp cone, which was brilliant. I mean, it just sounds nothing short of like breathtaking. It's the most amazing speaker I've ever heard in my life, and I've been through a lot of them. Trust me.
I haven't even. I didn't even know there was an Artist.
Yep.
That's the first I've heard of it.
Yeah,
wow, you're out of loop, dude.
Yeah, I guess so.
What the Artist is they wanted to go after the guy who's looking for a super duper kind of, like an amp for a tube amp enthusiast. The Katanas have a certain look to them, but what they wanted to do is they wanted to sort of reach the amp snobs that were very much into, cabinets and leather handles, and they wanted to buy, they buy into a mystique, if you want to call it that. And so what they did is they redesigned the cabinet to look sort of like Bad Cat Matchless-like, and the Mesa Lone Star series stuff. And then what they did is they just, put this Waza speaker in it and just beefed it up a bit, and they've created this whole new monster. The Artist is incredible. I can't say enough good things about it.
So the Artist isn't just there's the Katana wireless head too, right?
Yes, that's the Katana Air.
Gotcha. So that's not even. I gotta look this up.
No. While you're doing that, Clifton, you were asking about the Mini. You were curious about the Mini there.
Yeah. I've kind of looked at that, and I played that at Summer NAMM in Nashville, briefly. And are you looking at kind of like a skimmed down kind of practice amp with that? What kind of explain what the difference between that and the regular like 50 and 100 Katanas?
Well, the difference between that and the regular Katanas is the tone stack in the Katana Mini is, believe it or not, it's all analog with an analog style delay added onto it.
Okay.
So it's a very different beast. So what they did is they essentially took the best parts of like the little brown eye pedal that you're able to buy from Friedman, and they sort of built an amp around it.
Whoa, really?
Essentially, yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I didn't know that either. That's crazy.
Just essentially, in a nutshell, that's pretty much what it is. And they gave it the crunch setting. It's a very different sounding amp than the Katanas. I mean, when I first plugged it in, I was shocked at how good it sounded. Because I mean, most of those little amps, all of them are only good for just getting a little bit of sound, a little bit of fuzz buzz out of it, and that's about it. Whereas this thing was just like, I was shocked at how, it was warm, it cleaned up like a tube amp did. And then I started doing my research, and I started asking some of the techies and some of the nerds and whatnot that work at Boss. I was like, okay, so what's the deal here? What's going on with this thing? I want to know. So that's when I found out the whole thing of the analog tone stack and the way it was sort of designed and whatnot. So
hang on a second. You're telling me that that's designed around a Friedman Brown Eye overdrive, right?
Essentially, it's not going to be the same circuit, but the design is to basically get that sound out of the amp.
So that's so it's not the same circuit, but you get like 80 or 90% of that sound, and it's $100 less, and you have a speaker, and you can use it as a practice amp, or plug it in and go direct for quiet stage. That's a great introduction to it.
I really want to try one a lot more now. I didn't really. Yeah, I thought it was just like more like a basic battery powered amp.
Like a toy,
yeah. I haven't had a chance to play through it yet. Hey, Mike, I was going to ask you. So I looked that Artist up, and I don't know how I missed that. Maybe it's because I've been so happy with mine. But is the Wazacraft speaker going to be something that you can buy?
I was going to ask that too.
I don't think so. No, I don't think it's going to be available.
You can't drop it into your Katana? Damn.
Oh, come on. You couldn't slide us a couple on the sly there?
I don't know. You might be able to get it as a part, but I'm not sure.
Oh, that'd be cool if we could.
That would be something for the accessory guys to talk about.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that was kind of a joke.
That would be really cool though, to be able to like drop that into your, like, if you had really liked your Katana and you were like, I want to try this Waza speaker. That'd be pretty sweet.
Hell, I would put my cab.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the Artist is super affordable. I still don't understand how these are so affordable. Like,
that's a good question.
When I saw that the 50 was like $199 at first, I was like, "Are you kidding me?" Like, it's almost deceiving. Yeah.
Well, where the savings came in was the fact that they used the same chip as the GT100. So then all they had to do is design a platform on it, basically the power amp, essentially, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then some of the inserts and whatnot. So.
Okay, so we've kind of almost covered everything from the Katana group, but here's one that somebody's asking. They're wondering if we'll ever get a phone app for the bass Katanas, that we can use to do adjustments on the fly, with a wire as opposed to like the Katana Air where it's going to have a app associated with it.
Interesting. That's a good question.
Sorry, I missed that. So they're asking about
an app. No, about a wired app for being able to adjust some tone studio settings on the fly.
Right.
Probably.
Good question.
Yeah.
I don't see why they wouldn't come up with it eventually, but I mean, I'm not in research and development, so I can't really truthfully answer that. So
yeah, I can imagine that'd be a hard thing to answer because it's something down the line, and not everybody has an OTG cable that they can just plug into that to be something that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, so somebody asked about a Fender Blues Cube thing. Now, but really what he's asking is how would you go about getting a good Fender type sound, a good clean Fender type sound out of the Katana if you wanted that? That's not what the Katana's for, from what I'm understanding. But how would you go about getting a good, clean, like Fender sound out of it?
Well, the way I would sort of go about it is I'd start with the clean,
mm-hmm.
and then add in like some sort of clean boost or mid boost on low settings. That way you're getting a little bit of that Fender sort of blues breakup, that compression that those amps get.
Okay.
And then that's kind of where I would start, and then just sort of tailor it to taste.
Now that actually leads into the last question that was added while we were talking. So you wouldn't immediately go after those sneaky amps models to try and get a Fender sound. You go to that bass clean sound and then mess with EQ and mid boost to get it.
Yeah, because we have to realize with those sneaky amps is they are not optimized for that amp. Right? Like they're not optimized for the system. So you've got to go in and really tweak those suckers out.
Yeah.
You know, I have tried it, and I was kind of like, nah, I really don't need this stuff. So
yeah. There's some good ones. That match drive is awfully fun. I mean, but it does take. You're right. It does take some tweaking, and some of the combos are pretty nice. Yeah, I mean, I always keep coming back to the clean myself with maybe a boost in it. But for the most part, the clean reacts to pedals so well that, and to gain staging that it's like, man, I mean, I don't need to really put all that much work into it, you know. So we covered every one of these questions in one way or another. I rephrased some of them, but we basically got everything except for why did Frank really sell his katana? That's the question.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have
Buyer's
Frank.
remorse?
Well, we don't have Frank on the podcast, to be honest with you. I mean, that's the thing. I really think is that what was that first thing that we talked about. You know, if you expect this to be a modeling amp and sound great in your bedroom, that sounds like a processed, guitar sound that's already been mastered and ready to go, then it's not that. It's actually a guitar amp. Like what you're saying.
For sure.
This has completely changed my view about how this thing is getting the sound that it's getting. I don't know about you, Nick, but I was under the conception that it was something completely different animal than what Mike is telling us it is. What do you think?
He cleared a lot of stuff up for me. The speaker was definitely one of them. And yeah, I'm just I really enjoy this thing every single time I play it. If I get a little bored with something, I can go to something else. And I mean, I never get bored with it. It's that interesting. Like there's always a good sound to be found.
The thing that really sort of defined that for me and sort of brought it home, because I was scratching my head for the longest time with this thing. And what really sort of brought it home for me was the fact that, okay, well, I plugged into the cab and I ran the cab with some of my heads at home. And that's when I realized that this is very similar to like a cool rock and roll speaker. Like they really hit the mark on it. So
yeah, so it's not just flat. Yeah,
it's not just a flat speaker, because a lot of companies have tried that, and well, it sort of doesn't work.
Yeah. So I'll tell you, a year before I bought mine, and before Nick had convinced me to go ahead and just buy it, I was in, because you did, Nick, and there's no going sideways about it. Yeah, but I was in a Guitar Center. Yes, I was in a Guitar Center, and a kid was looking at these modeling amps, and I was just sitting there kind of playing the Katana. They had the first 50 that I had seen, and I was playing it, and I'm like watching this kid. I'm like, no, don't pick the Spider, no. I mean the PV Viper, it's okay, but it's really too complicated, for a kid just getting into guitar. And I said, hey. And this kid was about 12, 13 years old. I said, hey, come over here and try this one. Let me show you how this works. And it wasn't 15 minutes later that the kid walked out with a 50, because it was just so much more intuitive than any of these other amps. Now, I mean, otherwise, I do have like several students, and I used to kind of head them towards like a Fender Frontman or a Champion as their first amps, because they're pretty plug and play and they sound pretty good. And they give you a sound that you can work with and that you can kind of come off from into something else. But, I mean, there's hardly a person, unless real 60s Fender Champ amp to fall in their lap like one of my students did, that I haven't recommended a Katana to as a guitar amp. It's just a great thing. But it was crazy to just have a kid, instantly bond with an amp. Whenever, and I did that several times. I've said every time I'm in this shop, I'm like, I'm just talking to people, because I'm now an old man that talks to people in guitar shops. And it's like, you try this amp right here, and it's just so much easier to dial this thing in than just about anything else. They can try that Marshall code, or the only thing that's closest to that is like a Fender bass breaker. You can take that
Right.
bass breaker and dial that in to have a great sound and try your guitars out. You know, it's just the Marshall or not the Marshall, the Katana and the bass breaker are the two things that you can actually go into a guitar store and play at guitar store levels and maybe even a little bit louder and actually hear what the guitar sounds like rather than the crappy modeling or not pushing the tubes hard enough to do anything, you know? And I mean, I just think you guys did a great service to the whole guitar world and kind of revived some new life into it. That's for sure.
Thanks. Thanks a lot. That's really cool of you to say.
Yeah. Yep. And I will continue to sell them.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting to see, you know, a year or two from now, kind of where this goes, because I think it made a lot of guitarists happy, and it's kind of built a base where I think there's a lot of guys maybe who haven't jumped off into that. They're waiting for, okay, what are they going to do next, you know? And so it's going to be interesting to see and follow that. Well, I want to thank. Go ahead.
The next step is obviously going to be something off the GT1000, right?
Oh man, that'd be cool. Yeah.
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 So,
Right.
Well, I'll definitely, just opinion here, see kind of pro level, multi-platform type amp, maybe that would, you know, hit that guy who's kind of in the boutique amp market maybe and convince him that I don't have to have tubes. So that'd be interesting
where the
to
artist
see.
comes in, right? So,
Yeah,
I think
definitely.
we definitely hit a home run with that one.
Well, cool. Well, thank you so much, Mike, for taking time out of your day to come be on the podcast, and I really
Hey,
appreciate
you're
it.
welcome, guys. You guys aren't probably going to believe this, but while we've been doing this podcast, I happened to cook Deanna a nice steak dinner with a fancy salad on the side and some amazing gourmet medley of tomatoes that I'm going to just garnish with some Mediterranean sea salt and some fancy olive oil.
That's
I
awesome.
can actually believe it, Mike.
Yeah, we can believe it.
pretty sure I knew what you were doing.
Now, I have to ask though, did you use the GT100 to make the steak darker?
Oh gosh.
No, I didn't.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. You've answered a lot of questions and opened up kind of a Pandora's box of mystery. We did not know, and there's a lot of misconceptions going around about how this thing works. It's completely different than what we expected. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Mike.
Welcome, guys.
Yeah, and you know, let's continue the conversation. You know, if you're to our listeners, if you're listening and you've got a question, you know, maybe this sparks something. Hey, I'm curious about this. Go ahead and you know, this is going to be posted in the Boss Katana group, and
Sure.
we'll also have it Clifton Worley show. But yeah, I'd like to keep the discussion going, and a lot of interesting stuff unearthed, and a lot of good discussion. So thank you again, Mike.
You're welcome, guys.
All right, well, we'll let you
See you,
get to
Mike.
that steak dinner.
All right.
All right, thanks again, man.
You should see the beagle. He's just salivating right in front of me.
Oh,
Look at me. Like he's got this, dude,
Oh.
I'm getting some of this, right?
Yeah, and we've wrapped, and we're wrapped.
Excellent. All right, guys.
All right. Thank you, man. That was awesome. It was eye opening, and you enjoy the rest of your night. All right.
All right, brother. Take care.
Take it.
Later.
Ah.